Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Pathfinder Adventure Card Game, Wrath of the Righteous. This week it's the Wardstone Patrol. Crusaders of Iomide patrol the world wound, guarding the magic wardstones that hold abyssal hordes at bay. As the wardstones begin to crumble, valiant defenders, such as the brave Sir Illivan, are the last line of defense. Will they be enough to turn back the demonic hordes? The cohort for this scenario is Sir Illivan. The villain is Savash, and the henchmen are Brimoraks. During this scenario, if you fail a check to defeat a Bane, you may recharge a card that has the Soldier or Hireling trait to re-roll the dice and take the new result. When you play the cohort Sir Illivan on a check to defeat a monster, examine the top card of the Blessings deck. If it has the Corrupted trait, banish Sir Illivan and summon and encounter the henchman Corrupted Soldier. Locations are the Befouled Altar. If you fail a check to defeat a monster, discard a card from the Blessings deck. The Family Tomb. When a character dies, all characters at this location die. The Guard Post. At the start of your turn, summon and encounter the henchman Corrupted Soldier. The Wounded Lands. When you encounter a Bane, you may not play an ally on your check. And the Cavern. If you move or are moved from this location, move to a random other location. Sir Illivan is going to start with Imrijka. Imrijka will start at the Befouled Altar. Enora is going to start at the Family Tomb, and Shardra is going to start with Imrijka. It is Enora's turn, and she is here at the Family Tomb. She will explore, and it's the villain, Savash, Outsider Demon. Check to defeat combat 15. He is immune to the electricity and fire traits. All damage dealt by Savash is fire damage. Before you act, each character at your location is dealt 1 fire damage. Well, we have no way to avoid that, I suppose. So we'll take that on the Codex. So he's just at combat 15. We've already taken the 1 fire damage. So we are going to use Frigid Blast. And we are going to use a Blessing of Ascension. And we are going to use the Sage's Journal. So that will be a total of 2d12 plus 3d4 plus 1. And we get a total of 24, so we do beat Savash. And this location is now closed. Well, of course, we would have had a temporarily closed check on this one, so we better take care of that. I forgot to do that first. Anyway, this location is going to be closed, and now, well, let's see. Summon and defeat a henchman, Cultist of Baphomet, which I've got up here. Combat 10, difficulty of checks to defeat the Cultist of Baphomet is increased by these scenarios' adventure deck number, so we're still on base, so there isn't one. Before you act, if this is your first exploration, deals 1 combat damage. Well, we're not actually exploring. If undefeated, shuffle the top card of the Blessings deck into your location deck. Alright, so combat 10 for the Cultist of Baphomet. Imrijka will use her Javelin, so she is going to use her Dexterity range skill plus 2d6. So that'll be a d10 plus 2d6 plus 1. And she gets a 20. So she does defeat the Cultist of Baphomet, which means that this location will be temporarily closed, which leaves the villain only 3 locations to go to. So we'll pull 2 blessings off of the Blessings deck, add the villain in there, and shuffle these. Drop them into each of the open locations, and then shuffle those locations. Enora is now going to attempt to recharge Frigid Blast, so that's a d12 plus 1 for her to recharge. And she does not. She gets only a 4, so that goes away. The Blessing of Ascension was spent, and this was just a reveal, so that comes back into her hand. And she is going to reset her hand. The first verse of the Goblin Song is: Goblins chew and goblins bite, goblins cut and goblins fight, stab the dog and cut the horse, goblins eat and take by force. And now this location is closed. Okay, so this has a strange effect that when you close it, you set the cards aside and then you shuffle them together, or when it's closed, and make it into a location deck. So I've done that. This location is actually closed, but it's still going to have these cards, which I guess means you could explore if you wanted to. Play goes over to Imrijka. Imrijka is here at the Befouled Altar. If you fail a check to defeat a monster, discard a card from the Blessings deck. Oh, and of course, she would have buried her Javelin. She has no weapons in hand. She does have a spell, Detect Demon, but that only helps us to bring a demon up to encounter it. So She's going to discard this Silver Raven figurine so that she'll be able to draw a card, and then she'll reset her hand, and unfortunately does not pick up a weapon, but now has 2 blessings. Plague is going to go to Shardra, and she will explore, and it's a henchman. Pretty odd to start with both the villain and the henchman on the top, but when I build these locations, they're always the first card in, so they have been shuffled. Brimorak, combat at 12. The Brimorak is immune to the electricity and fire traits. The difficulty to defeat him is increased by twice the adventure deck number. All his damage is fire damage. Before you act, if the check to defeat Brimoraks had a piercing or... after you act, if the check to defeat Brimoraks had a piercing or slashing trait, the Brimoraks deals 2 fire damage to you. Well, let's see what we've got. We've got Sagacity. Actually, the only thing we have is the one to paralyze that would let us avoid him, really. There's a combat 12. We could just do a straight melee check with Shardra. Well, if she just goes with a strength melee check, that would be a d6. She has a blessing that she can spend. Imrijka has a blessing she can spend. And Enora has a blessing of Baphomet, which she can spend that would give her 2 dice. So that'll be a total of 4d6 to get a 12, which is not bad, actually. So 1 blessing here, another from Imrijka, and 1 from Enora. Rolling 4d6 to get a 12. And we get 16, so we do defeat the Brimoraks. And we did not have the piercing or slashing trait, so we may immediately attempt to close the location, which requires summoning and defeating the henchman Cultist of Baphomet. Cultist of Baphomet is a combat 10. Now, this is her first exploration, so she does get 1 combat damage, which we will take on Sagacity. And we're basically going to do the same thing, do a strength melee check, getting a blessing from both Enora and Imrijka, only now it'll be 3d6. Well, no, it's still 4d6, actually, because she gets her d6, then she's going to use her blessing of her own, so the previous checks would have been 5d6. Now it's 4d6. And we get a 12, so we defeat the Cultist of Baphomet, and then, on closing, bury a blessing from your discard pile. Well, that's a little bit annoying, but we'll bury the Blessing of Ascension, and Imrijka's going to have to bury one as well, because she is at this location. Well, that's 2 locations closed on the first round of play. Shardra is going to reset her hand. Play will go to Enora. Enora is going to move over to the Wounded Lands, but she's not going to explore. She's just going to reset her hand up to 6 cards. Play goes to Imrijka. Imrijka will move to the cavern because she's really the only one that can easily close this. And she doesn't have a weapon, so she's going to reset. Picks up her Battle Aspergillum and Blessing. And now to Shardra, who is going to move over with Enora. And she is going to use Cure. Reveal this card and choose a character at your location. Shuffle 1d4 plus 1 random cards from their discard pile into the deck. So 1d4 gets us 5 cards for Enora, which is what she has in her discard pile. So that all goes back into her deck and gets shuffled. Shardra can recharge this by making a Divine 8, which is a d10 plus 3 for her. And she does make the 8, so Cure gets recharged. And Shardra will explore, and we get the henchman, another henchman. Brimoraks, combat 12. Just 3 henchmen. And now, of course, this one was just recently shuffled because the villain may have escaped here. When you encounter Bane, you may not play allies. Okay, that's fine. He's a combat 12. He's immune to electricity and fire. There is no adventure deck number, so that doesn't affect. We're not going to have the piercing or slashing trait. So she is going to spend her blessing of Abraxas. Imrijka is going to spend her blessing of Ascension. Enora is going to spend her blessing of Ascension. And we will be rolling 4 d6. And we easily get the 12, so he is defeated. Succeeded at Wisdom or Survival 8. Now, her Wisdom is a d10. We can use Colo, recharge this card to add 1d8 plus the scenario's adventure deck number to a check by a character at your location to defeat a barrier or close the location. So that's what we'll do. So we will roll a d10 and a d8. Which gives us a total of 13, which is more than the 8, so we are able to do that. He would be recharged. And then the closing cost is, or when permanently closed on closing, bury a boon. Bury a boon. So we will do that. That is going to be the Wand of Paralyze. Actually, we do need to check if the henchman, if the villain is here, because he might be. He's not. So 3 locations closed now on round 2. She will reset her hand. Play goes to Enora, who now needs to move to another location. And I guess it will be the guard post. I'm going to bring the Corrupted Soldier down here because we'll be encountering that on our first turn each time. So she does have 1 spell, Dazzle, and she also has Create Pit, so she can avoid something. So we will explore. And we get a wooden shield. Constitution Fortitude 4. For her, that's a D4. She can't have armors anyway, so it's not a big deal to us. Does not acquire that. She could explore again, but we've spent so few blessings that I'm not going to. I'm just going to reset her hand and send play to Imrijka, who now at least has weapon. So she will explore here. And it is Spiked Pit Trap. Wisdom, Perception 7, or Dexterity Acrobatics 8. There are no blessings on the table, and these are both D8s for her. So we're going to do the Wisdom Perception check for 7, and hope we get either a 7 or an 8 on a D8. And we get a 6, so we don't. If undefeated, each character at this location is dealt 1d4 plus 1 combat damage. And we get a 1, so we actually take 2 combat damage. So that goes away. She does not have a way to explore again, so she will reset her hand and picks up another weapon. Play back to Shardra, who now needs to move. She will move over with Enora at the guard post. And she encounters leather armor, Constitution Fortitude 2. Well, she has a fortitude of D10 plus 2, so she automatically acquires that. She's going to use Belthus Loomis. Reveal this card to draw an armor, an item, and a weapon from the box. Banish 2 and set aside 1. Then banish this card to add the card you set aside to your hand, or bury this card and banish that card. So I'm going to shuffle the weapons, armor. For the weapon, that looks pretty good probably. There's the armor, and there's the item. For the weapon, we get the Flaming Heavy Pick plus 1. For your combat check, reveal this card to use your Strength or Melee skill plus 1d6 plus 1. You may additionally discard this card to add another 1d6 and the Fire trait. If any d6 rolled on this check is a 6, count it as a 7. Well, Imrijka may favor ranged weapons, but that's a pretty decent weapon. The armor is Magic Padded Armor. Discard this card to reduce combat damage dealt to you before or after you act by 2. Banish this card to reduce all damage dealt to you to 0. If you are proficient with light armors, bury it instead. If you are proficient with light armors, you may recharge this card when you reset your hand. And the item, Archer's Bracers. Reveal this card to add 2 to your ranged combat check. So that's actually possibly good for Imrijka as well. A couple of things for Imrijka. Shardra could use the Magic Padded Armor, although she currently has the Magic Shield. And they are different, because this is before or after you act, and it gives you a banish to get rid of all damage. Not really sure there which ones to take. I would say we'll put the bracers back. I guess we're going to put the armor back, and now we need to decide whether we want to pick up that Flaming Heavy Pick plus 1 and get rid of Belthus Loomis, or just bury Belthus Loomis and send this back. I think we want to acquire this. I mean, this is a magic weapon that's going to be good with undead. So we'll do that. That means that Belthus Loomis is banished. Shardra does not have a way to explore again, so she's going to have to discard her leather armor to get down to a hand size of 5. Now we'll send play back to Enora, who now needs to encounter the Corrupted Soldier, because this is she is starting her turn here. Summon and encounter the henchman Corrupted Soldier. Combat 9 or Charisma Diplomacy 6. Difficulty of the checks is increased by twice the adventure deck number, which there isn't one. If defeated, he does not deal damage as normal, instead deals combat damage equal to 2 plus the scenario's adventure deck number. Well, we're just planning on defeating him anyway. For the check, we will use Dazzle. For combat check, discard this card to use your arcane skill plus 2d4. We'll also use Sage's Journal. Reveal this card to add 1d4 to your check to defeat a henchman or villain. He is a henchman. So we will be rolling a d12 plus 3d4 plus 1. And pretty low rolls there, unfortunately, but good enough anyway. We get a 12, we only needed 9. So he's defeated, and that just lets us explore now, though. We'll see if we can recharge Dazzle. That's an Arcane 6, would be a d12 plus 1. And we do make the 6, so we recharge Dazzle. At this point, she does not really have an offensive spell. She has Create Pit, which would allow her to evade, though, so it's reasonably safe to explore. And it is a ghost. Check to defeat Combat 12 or Wisdom Divine 8. Is immune to mental and poison. If the check to defeat does not have the magic trait, the ghost is undefeated. Discard this card to evade a monster you encounter whose highest difficulty to defeat is 12 or lower. You may instead bury this card to put the monster on the bottom of its location deck. Right, we will use Create Pit to get rid of the ghost. Discard this card to evade a monster you encounter. And we're going to optionally bury this card to put him on the bottom of the deck. And we can make an Arcane 8 check, which is a D12 plus 1. And we actually make it so it doesn't have to be buried. Instead, we will recharge that card. Now, we don't have any spells in our discard pile, so even though we just played a spell, we can't recharge anything. That's done. Not a great deal of progress there, so we'll just reset our hand. The second verse of the Goblin Song. Goblins race and goblins jump. Goblins slash and goblins bump. Burn the skin and mash the head. Goblins here and you be dead. And send play over to Imrijka. And she is at the cavern, so she'll explore, and she encounters a rat swarm, combat 8. If you do not defeat the rat swarm by at least 4, shuffle it into its location deck. It still counts as defeated. Well, we've got lots of weapons here, so we shouldn't have too much trouble. Well, we'll use the glaive plus 1. For your combat check, reveal this card to use your strength or melee skill plus 1d10 plus 1. So that is going to be 2d10 plus 1, because it's not a ranged weapon. 2d10 plus 1 to get an 8. And actually to get a 12, because we need to beat it by at least 4. And we get a 13 plus the 1 is 14, so Rat Swarm is defeated. And we can use Imrijka's power now. If you defeat a monster on your turn, you may roll a d6. On a 4, 5, or 6, you may explore again. And we get a 6, so we can explore again. And it is a Mongrel Ranger. Combat C below. Difficulty of the check to defeat is equal to the highest difficulty to defeat a random monster from the box. Before you act, he deals 1d4 minus 1 ranged combat damage to you. Well, that's a bit annoying. So 1d4 minus 1. And of course we get a 4, so that's going to be 3 damage to us. Alright, I'm going to discard the crossbow, the glaive, and Sir Illivan for the damage that we've just taken from the Mongrel Ranger. And now we need to find a random monster. And it is a giant fly, so the combat is 9. So now the Mongrel Ranger will be a 9. We will use the Battle Aspergillum. For your combat check, reveal this card to use your strength or melee plus 1d8. You may additionally discard this card for another 1d4. So d10 plus a d8 to get a 9. And we get a 14, so we do defeat the Mongrel Ranger. I'll recharge that. She could explore again, but she's actually in pretty bad shape. She's got 8 cards in her discard pile and only 4 in her deck. So she's just going to recharge here. Picks up another weapon, and hopefully Shardra will be able to do some healing. Play goes over to Shardra, who is still here at the guard post, so now she needs to summon and encounter the henchman Corrupted Soldier, who's a combat 9. She could use a spell, or she could use her flaming mace. For her check, she is going to use Viper Strike. The Corrupted Soldier is not immune to poison, so it'll be a d10 plus 2d4 plus 3, and we're actually going to make it 3d4 by using the stage's journal. Reveal this to add 1d4 to your check, so a d10 plus 3d4 plus 3. And we get a 1 there, but it didn't slow us down. We still got enough to defeat that Corrupted Soldier. She will see if she can recharge Viper Strike. That's a d10 plus 3 for her. And she gets a 5, so she does not recharge that. She has a spell in hand, but she does not have a way to explore again, so she is going to send play back to Enora. Now, Enora needs to encounter the Corrupted Soldier, and she is going to choose to do the Charisma Diplomacy 6 check, and she will use her Charisma of d8 and recharge the Researcher to add a 1d6. So d10 and a d6 to get a 6. Sorry, a d8 and a d6 to get a 6. And we get a 9, so we do defeat the Corrupted Soldier. This gets recharged. She could explore, but she doesn't have very much in her favor. And there's at least 2 monsters still in here. But we will explore, take our chances. Get a Teamster. Check to acquire Constitution Fortitude 7 or Charisma Diplomacy 6. We'll just try the d8 to get the 6 for diplomacy. We get a 7, so we do acquire him. And we will explore again using him. And this time we get Giant Cockroach. Before you act, another character at your location summons and encounters a Giant Cockroach. If the check to defeat has a bludgeoning trait, add 1d8. So he's at combat 8, and Shardra needs to encounter him first. Well, she has the Flaming Heavy Pick. For your combat check, reveal this to use your strength and melee skill plus 1d6 plus 1. You may additionally discard this card to add another 1d6 in the fire trait. So she's going to do that. It's going to be a total of 3d6 plus 1 to get an 8. And she gets an 11, so she defeats him. And now it goes back to Enora to encounter a combat 8. She doesn't have the bludgeoning trait. In fact, she really has no way to fight him at all. Well, she's just going to have to use her strength melee d6. Both Imrijka and Shardra will give her a blessing. So it's going to be 3d6 to get an 8. And she gets a 13, so she does defeat the Giant Cockroach. And she will reset her hand. Play goes to Imrijka. Imrijka, who would still like to have some healing. Only has one card. Actually, she can't. She can just barely reset her hand. So if she takes any damage on this turn, she would be dead. So the wisest course of action is not to explore. Well, actually, she can recharge this to reduce combat damage dealt to you by 4. So that would be okay. 3 monsters and 2 barriers. We've encountered at least 1 barrier and at least 1 monster. Still leaves quite a bit in there. But she'll explore. It's an apprentice. Half-elf, arcane, divine, charisma, diplomacy, 8. Well, it could be good as an ally for either Enora or Shardra. She does have a divine of a d8 plus 1. So she will roll that. d8 plus 1. And she only gets a 3, which means she does not acquire the apprentice. She is not going to explore again because she doesn't have a way to do so. Now she has no cards in her deck, so she is in a very vulnerable position here. We need to get some healing for her, or just stop her from exploring. Play goes over to Shardra. She does have a spell still, although she needs to move over. I think she needs to move over here with Imrijka so that she'll be set to heal her if she draws into that cure, which she should do, I think. She'll explore, and is a blessing of Abadar. Dexterity disable 6 or divine 5. That'll be a d10 plus 3 for her. And we get a 5, so we do acquire the Blessing of Abadar, which is 2 dice to any check to defeat a barrier. She's going to reset her hand and hope that she gets cured. Well, she didn't. She got the Vulture. Play goes back to Enora, who is still here at the guard post, so she now needs to encounter the Corrupted Soldier once again. And he's a combat 9. She will use Fiery Glare. For your combat check, discard this card to use your Arcane or Divine skill plus 2d4. So that will be a d12 plus 2d4 plus 1. Then again, we'll use the Sage's Journal, so 3d4 actually. d12 and 3d4 plus 1. And a couple of 1s there. But a total of 13 is enough to defeat the Corrupted Soldier. So she needs to see if she can recharge this. It's an Arcane 10. Well, she'll use Brilliance, which is now going to give her a d10 plus a d12 plus 4 to get a 10. And just shy of that, she gets only a 9, so that does not get recharged. Now she needs to see if she can recharge Brilliance. It's an Arcane or Divine 8, so a d12 plus 1. And that one she does get to recharge. She could explore. It's a bit risky, but let's see what there is. It is a carbuncle, an aberration. Check to acquire none. When you encounter this card, you automatically acquire it. Shuffle it into a random character's deck. Recharge this card to explore your location. If you encounter a monster, shuffle this card into a random open location instead of recharging it. When a card would banish this card from your hand, bury this card instead. So this thing just sticks around forever, basically. So when you encounter it, you automatically acquire it, shuffle it into a random character's deck. So we're going to roll a d6 and see who ends up with a carbuncle. And it looks like it's going to go into Shardra's deck. So that was unusual. Now she'll reset her hand because she doesn't really want to use that blessing to explore again. Boy, she's got plenty of blessings, but no spells right now. Play goes back to Imrijka, who is really not in great shape, as we pointed out. She does have weapons, and Shardra's here with her, so if she was to fail a check to defeat a Bane, then she can recharge a spell, which she only has one, but she can still do it. So we'll let Imrijka explore. And it is a cultist, not a cultist, it's a Brimorak, combat 12, immune to electricity and fire, increased by the adventure deck number, or twice the adventure deck number. After you act, if the check to defeat Brimoraks had the piercing or slashing trait, he deals 2 fire damage to you. So we definitely need to use the Battle Aspergillum instead of the Corrosive Dagger. And then it would be a strength check of 5 to close. So combat 12 with the Battle Aspergillum would be a D10 plus a D8. She will also use the Sage's Journal, so that's a D4 on top of that. And this was her first exploration of the turn, so Enora is going to give her the Blessing of Baphomet, making that now 3d10 plus a d8 plus a d4. And that is definitely enough to defeat the Brimorak. We didn't have the piercing or slashing trait, so we don't have to worry about that extra damage. This location will now be closed. Succeed at a strength check with a difficulty of 5 plus the adventure deck number. So that's a d10 for her. Enora will give her another blessing, so it's going to be 2d10 to get a 5. And we get a 6, so that location closes. On closing, move to a random open location. She has, only one place to move to, actually, and that's where Enora is. So she'll move over here, and I assume that means Shardra gets pushed over here as well. Play goes over to Shardra, and she has one spell in hand. But she is starting her turn here, so she needs to encounter the Corrupted Soldier. It's a combat 9, which means she's going to have to use that one spell, Fireblade. Divine Skill plus 2d4. So d10 plus 3d4, we're going to make it because of the Sage's Journal, plus 3. So d10 and 3d4 plus 3. Which gives us enough to defeat the Corrupted Soldier. So now she'll see if she can recharge this Divine 8. So it's a d10 plus 3. And she gets a 9, so she does recharge that. She is going to drop the Vulture to reset her hand. She gets Colo back, and she gets another blessing. Not exactly what I was hoping for, because Imrijka is still in bad shape here. Play goes to Enora, who does not have a spell. She'd be okay with a barrier because of Chuffy Liquid, but there are no barriers here. So she's just going to reset as well. Now she has a spell. So Imrijka is starting her turn here at the guard post, which means she has to summon and encounter the Corrupted Soldier. He's a combat 9, so she'll use the Battle Aspergillum combat check. So a d10 plus a d8, the Sage's Journal for another d4. So d10, a d8, and a d4. And we get a 15, so we do defeat him, and now she is going to move to another location because it's not good for her to stay there and just keep doing checks when she has no ability to take any damage. So now we're over to Shardra, and I'm trying to figure out if the Blessings deck count is right. She should always be on 3s, so it must not be right. It should be 21, I guess. Anyway, she has to encounter the Corrupted Soldier. She's not really that well situated to do this fight. Okay, she's going to use the Sage's Journal, which is a d4. She's going to use her regular d6 melee. She will use a Blessing of Abadar to give her another d6. And Enora will give her a d6. So, rolling 3d6 and a d4. For a total of 12, so she does defeat the Corrupted Soldier. And she can explore now. And encounters a composite bow, dexterity ranged 8. Be tough for her to get that, even with a blessing, since her dexterity is only a d4. She will reset her hand. The third verse of the Goblin Song. Chase the baby, catch the pup, bonk the head to shut it up. Bones be cracked, flesh be stewed, we be goblins, you be food. Play goes to Enora, who needs to encounter our friend the Corrupted Soldier. So she's going to need to use Frigid Blast for that. It's going to be a d12 plus a 3d4 plus 1, because we'll still have the Sage's Journal. And he is defeated. And if we can get an Arcane 6, we can recharge that. So it's a d12 plus 1. And we don't get the 6. So unfortunately that goes away. But we just used a spell. So now we get to recharge a random spell. So let's see how many other spells are in here. It was Fiery Glare. And she will explore. And she encounters a Lance. Strength melee 8. Pretty unlikely for her to get that since she only has a d6. But she could use the Codex to do so. So she'll try using the Codex. Add 1 die to your check to acquire a boon. So now she'll be rolling 2d6 to get an 8. And we get a 7, so we don't make it. She needs to make an intelligence or knowledge 10 check to recharge this card instead of discarding it. So that would be a d12 plus 3 for her. We get a 7, so that is 10, and we do recharge the Codex. And she is going to reset her hand to 6 cards. Hopefully picks up a couple spells, and it looks like she does. Okay, so she's pretty well set now for exploring. Play goes to Imrijka. She's not going to do anything here. Play then goes to Shardra. Well, we're getting very low here. We've only got 4 cards left in this deck. Alright, Enora needs to encounter the Corrupted Soldier because she's still here at the guard post. And she's going to use the Charisma check, though. So she is going to use her Blessing of Ascension, and so now it's 2d6, and then she'll also use the Sage's Journal. So 2d6 and a d4 to get a 6. And we get an 8, so we do defeat him. She doesn't have any offensive spells, so I'm going to discard this carbuncle so that we can reset her hand and get 2 cards. And there's 1, Sanctuary. Okay, so that at least is beneficial. And then there's Cure, so that only leaves her 1 card in her hand. And Imrijka's at a different location, so she can't actually heal her at the moment, but that's okay. We're going to go back to Enora. Anyway, Enora needs to encounter the Corrupted Soldier. So she will do so with Dazzle and also the Sage's Journal. So d12 plus 3d4 plus 1. Getting a 20, so we definitely beat him. And now we need to do an Arcane 6, so d12 plus 1. And we get an 11, so we recharge Dazzle. And now we can also recharge a random spell. So there's 1 spell. I think there's only 1 here in the deck. And she will explore. And look at that, it's Savash, the villain. Combat 15. He is immune to electricity and fire. Before you act, each character at location is dealt 1 fire damage. Okay, so Shardra is going to have to take that damage. I guess she'll just use the shield as the damage because it's combat. And he does fire damage, so that doesn't count. And Enora has to take a damage, so she will take it on the Book of the Lore Master. And now she has Force Missile. For your combat check, discard this card to use your Arcane skill plus 2d4. Well, we actually have 3d4 because we're the Sage's Journal. To get a 15. Imrijka is going to spend a blessing to help us out. So that's going to be 2d12 now plus 3d4 plus 1. And that's plenty to defeat Savash. After you act, if it had the piercing or slashing trait, which we didn't, we had the force trait. So he is defeated, nowhere to run to. And so what do we get? Each character gains a random ally that has the hireling or soldier trait. Okay, so I think you can see that where I was able to close those locations early was really helpful because they struggled along the rest of the time, even with just those 2 spots open. Drawing for Enora, that's a soldier. Drawing for Imrijka. He's a hireling, so caravan guard. And drawing for Shardra. He's an athlete. I think she started with an athlete. Alright, so that is the end of the Wardstone Patrol. Next up will be the Trader's Lodge. This is my 100th video, and to celebrate that, I have decided to give you guys a chance to win something. And so you will have seen a couple of cuts in there where I told you the verses of Goblin Song. The first one of you who correctly comments with all the verses of the Goblin Song in the comment section below the YouTube video will win the Paladin class deck. I'll have that sent directly to you, Paladin class deck for the Pathfinder Adventure Card Game, which you can use with Wrath of the Righteous, but I think you can use it with any of the adventures. And I'll announce that as soon as someone correctly replies. So once again, the 3 verses from the Goblin Song, they have to be correct. And then you will win that Paladin class deck. So just remember, that's just the first person who gets that correct. So if you see someone's already commented on that, you don't need to put in your comment again unless you think they've gotten it wrong. So have fun with that. Hope you enjoyed this episode of the Pathfinder Adventure Card Game Wrath of the Righteous. Please like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel so you know when I'm posting videos in the future. And I will talk to you next time.